Welcome to the Black on Shelf podcast, a podcast championing Black and Brown entrepreneurs on the digital and physical shelves. I'm your host, Tanaj Ferguson. This is Black on Shelf. Yeah, so it is the Independence Day. It's the Bahamian Independence Day. We're 48 years old as a country, and we're getting to talk. So I kind of feel like things have aligned themselves, that we're talking about your progress,
Absolutely.
and the fact that we're both Bahamian and being able to be here, making big waves in our industry. I always start with how I discovered or learned about the brands coming on, because I'm just so interested in the entrepreneurs as well as what they're making.
Yes.
And for you, it really came at a time when you were getting some of your first retail presence.
Mm-hmm.
And the community I was running at the time, we all gathered around supporting your launch into Target. And I realized, oh my gosh, some of my friends were like, she's Bahamian, and I was like, it's over. I'm about to do crazy things now, right?
I love it.
We support each other, and that is a big deal when you not only come from another country and do great things and navigate the system, which we don't really know that much about where we're from. It's just a big testament, and we're proud of you. And that's why I admire you so much, Sherrel.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I so appreciate the support, and definitely couldn't do it without people like you. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? We've been telling the Boss Fam that we're Bahamian, but tell us a little bit about where you have come from and how you're where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for inviting me on this amazing podcast. It's a pleasure, to be acquainted with individuals such as you that are just, powerful, that are supportive, that are nice. Right? Oftentimes we don't run into people that are nice, but just genuinely wanting to help and support. And so first and foremost, just want to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And then in terms of me and where I'm from and who I am, so I am originally from Nassau, Bahamas, born and raised. 242 Blue Hill.
You have to do that.
Golden Gates number 2.
Okay. I grew up around there too, by the way. My grandmother.
I went to Carmichael. I went to Canviiy.
Okay.
I went to SC. Where'd you go?
I went to Queens College. For elementary school, I went to St. Cecilia's. I went to Catholic school.
Boily, I don't want to hear it.
But hey, we all end up in great places. So
Absolutely.
I went to St. Cecilia's, then Queens College, then made my way to the US for college. What about you for college?
That's cool. So a little bit about me. So yes, born and raised in Nassau, but I've been back and forth.
Yeah.
My mom and dad ultimately moved over here, particularly in the Panhandle, top Florida area. To pursue a bachelor's in accounting, my mom in particular.
Okay.
And so we had a chance to kind of come over during our adolescent years. And it was some back and forth, kind of crazy.
Every
but
summer,
ultimately,
Christmas, that type of thing.
No, back and forth, spent, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th here, and then went back in the 8th grade and 9th grade, then came back in the 10th grade. Just chaos, girl.
Wow.
Anyway,
so you were transitioning. You knew how to adapt to both.
Oh yeah, it was a lot going on, but at the end of the day, ended up I played softball all my life, so I was blessed enough to get a softball scholarship. So I graduated from Stetson University in Florida, which is a small private institution, but they call it the Harvard of the South. So whoop whoop to Stetson.
Okay.
So was able to get my undergrad in marketing, and then started my marketing career. So I have 15 plus years in corporate marketing, spanning from, tourism, hospitalities, where I was calculating economic impact study numbers in terms of visitor spend, visitor numbers, really boring stuff, but it gave me a great appreciation for data. It gave me a great appreciation for understanding how tourism really impacts just your numbers, your occupancy rates, all of those things.
The economy. And we know for the Bahamas, at least, it is very tied. It's our number one industry. When things are not going well around the world, we feel it. We feel it. Absolutely. Now, were you studying tourism in the Florida market or in the Caribbean region?
Actually, just in the Florida market. So I was looking at the Tampa Bay area, and as well as Leon County area, which is in the
Okay.
capital of Florida, so Tallahassee area. So
Mm.
yeah, so kicked off my career kind of in tourism and hospitality, then later moved into manufacturing, kind of apparel manufacturing,
Okay.
and also software enterprise. So I was doing marketing for a software company for some time, but where I really sort of got my bug was that owner of that software company kind of tapped me on the
Mm.
shoulder and he was like, hey, we just acquired a personal care luxury brand. Do you want to run it? And I'm like, software, beauty, like, of
You're like,
course, like, let's
yeah.
do this. But what he didn't tell me was the fact that it was purchased out of bankruptcy. So
Okay.
that meant everything was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a great opportunity, and we won't dive into it because I know you have great questions, but it was a great opportunity. It was a master class where I learned every single element of how do you build a brand.
Yeah.
And from there, that's when I got my bug.
Yeah, no, and I love that you mentioned that because that is one of the pieces of your background that really resonates with me. The fact that, although we haven't had a lot of exposure growing up, you didn't grow up saying, "Oh, I want to be a marketer." You
Yes.
fell into it and really embraced it completely. Your skills were really attuned to it. You came at it from a very analytical aspect, which makes for a great marketer, of course.
Yes.
But then you also had the psychology of the consumer at
Yes.
your fingertips. That was the part that you were able to merge and say, okay, I know how to make this brand successful. So talk to us about some of those key experiences in that role that
Woo.
really led you to be able to build Canviiy.
Great question. So, what was really amazing, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was, as I mentioned, a masterclass, but I was touching on every single element of the business. When you work for larger CPG companies, you just have one role typically, right? So if you're doing branding, you're just figuring out how do you brand this product to the masses, right? You don't touch production, you don't touch sourcing, you don't
Right.
touch ERP infrastructure, which is on the back end of things. You don't look
Mhm.
at pricing. And so I had a chance to also do formulations. I work with vendors in Germany and China and Japan. There was over 250 SKUs. And so what that meant is that we had to determine what we were going to keep, right? What we were
Mhm.
going to sunset ultimately, and then ones that we had to reformulate. And so that process, literally in our office, it was 250 labels like on the
Right.
wall. And we had to determine what we were going to keep, what were the heroes, and which were the ones we were going to focus on.
Yeah.
And so in addition to marketing, I was working hand in hand with the CEO at the time. It was honestly, he and I in the corporate office. And then there were two corporate stores in Key West, Florida. I'm sorry, two retail stores in Key
Okay.
West, Florida, and there was a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale. So majority of the employees were actually in the shops, in the retail shops. And
Right.
so I was working hand in hand with the CEO. And that was really different for me because I was a marketing manager at the time, but never really worked in the C-suite. And so that gave me exposure to how,
Yes.
C-suite executives communicate, how they handle themselves, how they approach issues, how they come up with solutions, how they communicate. And it was a life-changing experience because even though at the time I knew I was doing something special, my goal in life was just to be a CMO. Like I just want to be a
Okay.
chief marketing officer. That's all I wanted to be. So I was
Right.
like, I'm going to be
All,
here. Yeah, that's all
which is
I want to
also
be
a
in
big
life.
goal too, right?
Yeah, and so I was like, if I could just continue to just work on this and build this is it for me.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, as I started working on it, what I recognize is that, man, when we looked at a product and we was like, okay, we need to change this, and this, and then it came back, and then you touched it and you smelled it and you
Yeah.
you experienced. I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like I
Love
did
this
this,
process, right?
and it was that like, wow, I did this.
Mhm.
And I was like,
Ownership.
I love this. And so that in that moment, I was already thinking like, do I go work for a national, multinational CPG brand so I can do
Mhm.
this on a larger scale, or do I build something myself?
Mhm.
And it was in that moment where I was
Yeah.
I loved every aspect of it. And
Yeah.
so in those moments, what I also learned was what went bad, right? And so, for example, packaging, what we learned, we had ordered some tubes, and we learned it actually on a plane when you're dealing with elevation. Sometimes tubes can explode if you haven't
that happens to me when I travel.
They're right, the elevation of it.
Right.
So we got complaints from customers. I got to the hotel, and it was a shaving cream. The shaving cream just bust on some guy's face. And so everything that could have went wrong, from typos on a label, from the wrong packaging being ordered, to learning that vendors don't move if you don't check on them, right? Like you can think, my boss kind of taught me this, like his way was saying that, or the CEO way of saying is like, don't expect anyone to do your work, right? And so just because you call and you put in that order doesn't mean the order's been submitted. So you got to follow up, you got to make sure, get those timelines. And so it was just all around just a great experience. And
you're saying it's great, even though we talked about the problems, but as a marketer or someone in product, that's actually where you learn when things don't go right. That's where you learn, because then the process of putting it back together, fixing it, that's the learning process. It kind of is a blessing in disguise.
Yes. And one other thing that I tell my entrepreneur friends or individuals that are thinking about getting into the CPG space, and no matter what category, is the importance of owning your formulas, right? And during that process with those 250 SKUs, we were kind of going through the battle with the manufacturer of which formulas we owned and which formulas we didn't. And so
was this a contract manufacturing off the shelf type of situation?
You got it. Absolutely. And so with that contract manufacturer, we had to negotiate formula ownership. And that is really, really key, because in business, in particular, if you're producing products, it doesn't matter how many products that you produce. If you don't own those formulas, which is your proprietary product, that's what you own, then you don't have a company. Because if that company goes out of business, you don't own those formulas and you don't have those documents. And so that's as you talk about lessons learned and key learnings, that number one always stuck in my head. And so when we got ready to expand our business and talk to contract manufacturers, I understood, even if they make a little tweak, they can own your formula, how important formula ownership was.
So for some members of the Black and Shelf family, the Boss Fam, who are still learning about this, but might be going through this exactly, I think this is a great learning opportunity. So I want to break some of this down, because I love that you mentioned that and had that personal experience, which led you to make some different decisions when you were creating your own brand with Canviiy.
Yes.
So when we talk about contract manufacturing, and I've said this in a previous episode, but we'll just recap it here. This is when a manufacturer is making the products for you. More specifically, we talked about off the shelf. This is when they already have a formula for a product. You're going to sticker it. You're going to put your own label on it. It's going to look like your own, but they already have the formula. So what Sherrel is talking about is how she learned how important it is to actually go ahead and own that. You get speed of market. These are some pros to doing something off the shelf. There's a ton of speed to market because you get to more quickly take something that's already proven, tested. Also, you get, competence. A lot of times this manufacturer, they are an expert within this space. Some drawbacks is when you want to leave that manufacturer, you kind of can't, they own that formula, right? So it does limit your ability to move. What are some other drawbacks or pros and cons you would say?
So a couple things to add to your points, because that's really key, right? So the benefits of working with a contract manufacturers, to your point, they have the know-how of how to build certain items and how to build certain products. However, there's an alternative way where going into that relationship, you could own your formula. And what you do is you can partner with an independent cosmetic chemist, right? If you're getting into cosmetics, and have them build that formula for you before you even get there.
Right.
That way, when you sit down to the table, it is your formula that you're bringing to the table. And ultimately you're telling them, listen, if you make any tweaks or any changes, because oftentimes when you get ready to scale your business and grow your formulas, you need to do that, right?
Yes.
And so they're going to say, well, if I tweak X, Y, and Z, you would not have been able to have this formula unless we tweaked it, unless it was because of our extensive knowledge. So you have to negotiate like, yeah, that's great. But if there's a price tag to that, they may be right? You say, okay, I'm willing to pay $2,000, right, for that expertise that you're bringing to the table. However, we still own the formula. So when everything is done, they have to hand you a package with how that is produced. What are the ingredients? What are the percentages? Who are the suppliers for that?
And
ultimately
you own
give
that,
you that package.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're right. And then some of the pros,
I love
of
that
course,
you mentioned that.
absolutely, with that. And so for us, particularly with Canviiy, we don't use any off-the-shelf formulas. For us, I understood from the very beginning that the value of the company is in proprietary formulas. And so I never had an interest in getting off the shelf. That doesn't mean that's still not good, but that's just not our theses for our brand. And so all of our formulations are proprietary, are ones that we own, and going forward, that will always be the case. And so with that, to your point, there's definitely benefits of partnering with a contract manufacturer. I would say, just like they say, when you're finding a business partner, make sure you understand them, make sure you understand their business, how they operate, ask lots of questions, because I've had experiences with great ones and some not so great, literally.
Tell us about some of those experiences, because, okay, you have your idea, and we'll double back onto exactly how, you identified the right market and all that, but talk to us about some of the process that was involved with testing and trialing, kind of keeping one, you're dating the contract manufacturer in essence. What was that process like? What would be some of the reasons you might say, this is not for me, I got to find another thing? And what learnings did you bring forward to find a better one that better suited your needs?
Yeah, so in the early days, and we launched our business in November 2015, so it's definitely been a while, but in 2014, late 2014, when we were looking for that manufacturer, we actually had a great partnership with a contract manufacturer that understood that we were a smaller brand, was willing to work with us, was willing to negotiate on that formula ownership. It just was a phenomenal partner. And so, but one of the things that changed was that they actually sold it to someone else.
Oh, wow. That's big.
And that changed the entire dynamics, because this new owner, he was difficult to work with.
Yeah,
Meaning,
so the relationship changed for sure.
Oh yeah, tremendously. He did not care about the small customers in the company. He, if anything, he wanted to get rid of them.
Right.
Because he felt as if, they're not bringing in the big bucks. We're spending too much time on smaller companies, and we're not going to service them the same way we did. And so literally, when I started saying, okay, let's talk about new products, new formulations, he's like, we're not in that business anymore. We're not. Like, we're not going to create new formulas for you. And I'm like, even if I'm willing to pay for it? And he's like, no, we're not in that business. He's like, what you want to, he's like, if the only way I would do that, if you put your house up for collateral.
Like, I'm not doing
I'm
that.
like,
okay.
Yeah. And so you talk about when it's time to go. And so my thing is that because I have corporate experience, it's different when you dealing with someone that doesn't have corporate experience. I know for a fact that he wasn't making other brands do that. Right. And so my question to him was, are you making, because I actually recommended a bigger brand for them to work with. And so I said, are you making brand X do the same thing that you're asking me to do? And he's like, oh, well, that's confidential. So I can't share that. I was like, that's what I thought. I said, okay, I'm not going to argue with, I'm the customer. So if you're making this difficult for me, that's your position. I respect that. And I'm going to respect the decision that I'm going to make. And
you don't want someone making your product who doesn't really want to be in the business of making your product. That's a horrible.
And so that was a perfect example where I had a beautiful relationship with this great manufacturer. I even had pizza parties with the staff. They knew my name. Like, it was great. And it went from beautiful to, crazy. And so, again, because we owned our formulas, and literally he knew I was going to leave. So he was checking the documents to see if we had owned it, and we did. And I had already had all my documents. And so ultimately I had my documents and I went elsewhere. But if I didn't,
it would have been a whole different set of options that you had. You might have had to endure that relationship, or kind of scurried to find a different situation that wouldn't leave you with no product.
You got it. And it happened to many other brands that ultimately left as well.
Yeah.
And so it was a great experience for me. And I say great because it again affirmed what we were doing was right. And ultimately, we found another partner and we made it work. But that's why it's so important. And I love that you're educating, your audience on this, that is so important, even if it's food, like if it's
yeah, I was going to say, right? It's the same way. Like, you can get a scientist or a food scientist really to make the product. If it's something that doesn't necessarily require food science, you can get a chef or someone on your team that's going to do a technician, right? Who's going to create the formulation and give you that scale up formula so that you can own it. And you also, want to make sure you put some legal agreements around NDAs and legal agreements around them not being able to take that, so that you are sure that you're safe, secure. Because that, like Sherrel mentioned, that is the proprietary formula is your business. That's your unique differentiation. That's a big part of it. Sometimes it's not the product and it's the brand, but you still want to make sure a part of that brand is that quality product, whether it's a food, apparel, whatever it is. You still want to protect that as much as you can. Sherrel, for your product, talk about what went into making your product proprietary. What sorts of things did you have to do for those, maybe not with the CPG experience like we do, but are interested now? They heard this and they're like, all right, what do I need to do first? What are some of the things involved in getting your product to be proprietary?
Yeah, so I think it's really starting, and I'm sure you've addressed this before, but just starting with the solution, right? And for me, my experience was I love to get my hair done and love to get my extensions. For me, it's easy. Boom, you bump and you go. That's how I prefer to keep my hair, because it's easy.
Yes, it's beautiful, by the way, for those who can't see her.
My scalp was on fire one day. And I was already thinking, like I said, I had the bug of what am I going to do? And what's that special product? And when I came home from the hair salon one day and my scalp was on fire, my husband looks at me and he said, babe, why don't you create something for that? Because I was getting ready to like rip my hair out of my head. Like it was so bad. And I looked at him and I was like, you know what? No, that's lame. Like scalp care, like, because 7 years ago, scalp care wasn't hot. It was like the redheaded stepchild of the industry.
It was all about Miracle Grow shampoo. It was about the basics, really. And
it was about
for Black women, it was about us actually just having a presence or a product online or in any one store. But we weren't down to the point where we cared about our scalp as much yet.
Right. And honestly, it was all about styling. If your hair looked good, it didn't really matter what you were putting on it, or just it looked good. Right. Yeah. And so I was like, I don't know. And then I started, I'm a researcher by trade. So I started doing research, and I noticed not only women that just wore extensions, but you had women that had scalp conditions, whether that's eczema, psoriasis, seborrheic dermatitis, women that colored their hair, right, also have that irritation from hair color. And so I was like, this is really interesting. And just people in general who just have a dry, itchy scalp. And so I said, let me go check it out, and, looked at what was on the shelves. And so, of course, we had all of our greases that we could have. We had our oils, and we had some stinky stuff that we all know about. Yeah. And I said, all of them are heavy, they're greasy. Most of them contain harsh chemical ingredients.
Yeah, definitely.
I said, I know I could do this better. I know I can. And so I went and I said, I'm my own customer. So the question before you build anything is, what do you want to achieve, right? What are the objectives of that formula, that solution? And I said, I'm my own customer. So I know I want it to be non-greasy, non-runny. I know I want it to have phenomenal ingredients. I know I want it to be super clean. And so I started a list of all of these attributes I wanted to achieve. Yeah. And then ultimately I sought out a cosmetic chemist, and I said, hey, here's what I want to achieve. Let's go on a journey together where we look at any and all ingredients across the entire world to see which will be best to achieve these objectives. And that's the journey that we took. And ultimately it took us 14 to 16 months to research, to create prototypes, to test, and finally for me to approve and say, this is it.
Now, did you launch with one, or did you always have the 3 from the beginning?
Great question. So we actually launched with one formula, which was our Scalpless Itch Calming Serum.
Okay.
It's right here. I'm going to grab it.
Oh, my favorite one, the nozzle. Okay, people, the nozzle. Okay.
That's right. The Scalpless Itch Calming product is was our first formulation. And I actually had it in 3 different packaging. So I used to have it in a small little mini tube for on the go travel.
Right.
I actually had it in these little cups that you could dip into, and you could put swabs in there.
Yeah.
And then it was this. And I should say the 4 ounce for those that are listening, with a nozzle tip
4 ounce with
bottle.
a nozzle, which is clutch. It can get in your tracks. It can get down in braids. If you have thick hair, you know, perfect to get through any 4C, any curls.
Oh yeah.
It gets right to the scalp for you.
Yes. And that was important too. Again, knowing who we are, knowing how we wear our styles, knowing what type of textures we have. I'm like, we have to have a nozzle tip. And so searched everywhere to find that, but we found it. And so with that, we launched with those 2 items. Actually, I didn't have the bottle yet. And what I learned is that people didn't want a little bit of product. They wanted the bottle. So it took us some time to get traction, because they're like, that's cool. It looks great, but where's the bottle? But we had to order 10,000 bottles at the time, which was a lot. So I'm like, I can't afford 10,000, but if you try this will be good. And so it took us some time, but that was really—
And to insert, the reason we couldn't afford 10,000 right away, well, the reason the number was so high, that's the minimum order quantity at the time. And so Sherrel found a more creative way. She's like, okay, I can't order that, but I still need to have this business. I'm going to do this in the interim.
You got it. Exactly. And then when we could afford it, that's when we ordered it. And then it just kind of took off from there. So that's initially, you know, how the journey started. And one of the things that it was important, especially being a marketer, and you know, this is like, for me, I knew you only have one chance. You only have one chance to impress customers, to impress consumers. And so I was like, if our first item, isn't great, they're not coming back. They're not going to be reordered. And I think oftentimes entrepreneurs forget, like, the reason of being in business is not just to make money, but it's to drive repeat purchases, right? If you could drive repeat purchases, that means you're winning. That means you have a solid product. That means you have something that people desire and they want to get in their homes, which ultimately will switch behaviors. And so for me, that was important. And so if it took 14 months, I was willing to take that time to make sure whatever we launch, and I think we do that with every SKU that we do produce, is to make sure that it is of its highest quality, of its highest performance, and that ultimately is going to be an item or a solution that our customers love.
Yeah, something else that I really love about your brand is we talked about some of the way you identified the opportunity. Your scalp was on fire. You took a personal problem and said, "Oh my gosh, I don't see this in a very easy, convenient way. I'm going to create it, put the best ingredients in there." So much of that also meant that anyone could use it, not just those whose scalp was on fire. You could find other markets. You have a partnership with the Moffitt Cancer Center.
Yes.
And I love that, that also is another proof point that you were able to even leverage it with folks who are very sensitive when it comes to ingredients, chemicals, and it could be of a relief to their scalps. When people go through cancer, their scalp might also burn. Talk to us about how that partnership came about and how you leverage it today.
Absolutely. And it was kind of perfect timing for them and for us. And so, as I mentioned, particularly when we launched, we were thinking about the scalp in terms of hairstyling and things of that nature. But then we started to hear from customers that did have eczema and psoriasis and seborrheic dermatitis. And so during that time, that really sort of changed the trajectory of the brand, right? Like, we're not this cool, hip, fun brand that's just out here for hairstyles. Like, we're actually impacting the lives, right? And so instead of being a beauty company, we actually realized we were in the liberation business. We were liberating women and men alike from the frustration of scalp irritation. Yeah. And so when we met Moffitt, it was kind of perfect timing because, and Moffitt Cancer Center, for those that aren't aware, is actually ranked in the top 1 percentile of cancer hospitals in the United States. What's great is that there was, as you know, there's been a trend in the marketplace in terms of consumers demanding and wanting clean, organic, natural products, right? Yeah. And the same thing is happening in healthcare, where they're also wondering where those clean, right, healthy, organic products that they could use while they're actually a patient. And so consumers were actually, I should say patients were actually demanding that, like, hey, what do you have? Because oftentimes 9 out of 10 times a physician, they just recommend what they learned in school, right? And this is something that was just, it was just mind blowing to me, is that if their book said you prescribe zinc, if you prescribed a steroid cream, that's what they gave patients. They didn't really think about it twice. And so if you can think about a cancer patient in particular. So what's happening when they're going through chemotherapy? And I'll kind of walk you through their process and why they wanted to partner with us, right? So chemotherapy is designed to ultimately kill, right, the growing of the cancer cells within the body. However, when they're having that radiation, while they're killing those cells, chemotherapy also kills other cells, right, within the body, which means that it kills also hair cells. That's why one would lose their hairs, because it's killing those hair cells as well. And so during that process, you are experiencing, yes, a lot with your body, but also a lot with your scalp, right? Because your hair may be falling, you may experience soreness, you may experience sensitivity. You could also have lots of dryness. And so literally the physicians were just giving them steroid creams, like, okay, here, deal with it,
And it kind of makes sense. There wasn't really another option. So we're going to use what we've been using, and that's going to have to work out.
Exactly. And so patients were starting to demand cleaner products. And so ultimately I had an opportunity to present to them in terms of what our solution, and it just so happened because they're headquartered in Tampa, and we are as well, that made it a little easier to have conversations, because it's definitely hard to get a conversation in healthcare. I just want to let you guys know that. And so I had an opportunity to present to a director. She was amazing. She's like, this is interesting. And she took it on and she sort of presented it to stakeholders within the organization. They thought it was great. And then it started the process of, now we have to vet every single ingredient. We have to look at all of it, make sure, it's healthy, it's clean, it won't, hurt patients. And that process took about a year to get approved. That's what a lot of people don't know. It took about a year. And once the great thing that Moffitt did was they gave us an opportunity to prove our product, right? They said, okay, you say it's this and it's that, it's long lasting, we're going to see. And so they were kind enough to partner with us to do an observation study. And so it could contain users that might've been employees and or patients, which kind of opened up the pool for us.
Right.
And ultimately, 90% of the users said that they loved it. It was extremely effective in reducing itchiness. 90% of the users said, or participants said, that they would actually recommend it to others. And here was the key insight, is that out of all of the users, 50%, now this is half, said that our itch calming serum, our Scalpless itch calming serum, lasted 3 to 4 days on average. They didn't have to reapply it for 3 to 4 days. And so we always knew it was long lasting. It would last longer than any other items on the shelf, but they help us affirm, right, that point, that yes, it lasts on average 3 to 4 days, no itching sensation whatsoever.
That's
and
amazing.
So ultimately it was a hit. And, once they got those strong results back, they was like, let's start the partnership. It started in 2018 and we are still partners today. And it just feels amazing to be, one of the only Black owned, solutions within their healthcare organization. And we continue to work hand in hand with particularly the Moffitt Salon. When patients are trying to come in and figure out how do they approach scalp health, we're one of their top recommended brands. And so it feels amazing.
That is amazing. And to know that, you were first working on a beauty brand, but you unlocked that liberation is really where it's at. And from realizing many people experience the need for that when it comes to scalp care, you were able to unlock this other opportunity in the medical field that truly is helping people live a better lifestyle, even while dealing with their injury or with their disease, right? It's easing them of the impacts of radiation, which is something cancer patients certainly need to get better.
Absolutely. And they've not only just been amazing, but they've unlocked a lot of different insights where I didn't even think about. So when we came out with our foam treatment, our foam treatment is designed to reduce flakes, because we would always get with our hero product, our itch calming serum, is this good for flakes and is this good for hair growth, right? And so we develop products specifically for that based on customer feedback. But they shared with me, and this is something I didn't even think about, when patients are sitting in their beds, sometimes they can't get up. And so in order for them to clean their scalp, they don't want to use a heavy shampoo, because we don't even think about it. Shampoos in general are pretty heavy, right? Whether it's a goo or a gel, and they're trying to hold on to every strand of hair that they have. And so they prefer to use our lightweight foam treatment because it rinses easy. It doesn't really drag down the hair. And they may not be able to get in the shower. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. And so it's just been a really phenomenal partnership, and we've been learning so much, and just more importantly, like honored and grateful that we can, help these heroes on their journey. That's what's most important.
I love that. And when did you get the bar, and how did that product come about?
Yeah, so we were actually going to trade shows, and we were going to farmers markets, and people was like, okay, this is great for the scalp, it's working. What do you have for the body? Because if you think about that customer base, a percentage of them, they have problematic skin as well, if they have problematic scalp. And so I said, we don't have anything right now, but we'll figure it out. And so literally we took all of those amazing ingredients. So organic aloe vera, lavender, manuka honey, jojoba. Also, we infused it with calendula and
soothing
fresh
ingredients.
lavender. So we said we could do this. And so we ultimately put some amazing ingredients together. And one of the things that we did not do, right? We did not infuse it with any artificial perfume or fragrance or any artificial color. And because we learned during our initial testing with other things, is that is the number one irritant for people that have, skin or scalp condition. Absolutely. And so and because of that, our soap is definitely one of the items that our customers love. I use it every day on my skin. That's the only
and glowing. Okay.
Thank you. It's the only thing that I use. And what's really amazing is that men love it. Like, I get emails from customers like, my husband stole my soap, I gotta order another one. Like, I love that, because
it's the smell, it's the feel, it's unisex, I guess, at this point.
It is. And I think because it doesn't have like a fruity, feminine smell, it's just natural in what it is. And so I think men love that. And then of course it has some peppermint, so they love that kind of zesty, tingling sensation.
Love that as well. So that was a good milestone actually for your business. I do want to cover some other milestones. I have a few in mind: Target, CVS, but talk to us about what are some of the milestones in your business that you really continue to embrace and feel like, man, I'm making progress. This is what I maybe envisioned, or in some cases never envisioned for the business. What are some of those that you would say?
Yeah. So what's been great, I think Moffitt is probably the proudest achievement to date. But in addition to that, we also have distribution and travel retail. And so we have space. We actually have custom displays in about 3 airport locations right now, and looking to expand that even bigger this year. So that's going to be really exciting for Q4. But it was that, and I really think it has a lot to do with listening and understanding customers, because I literally was having lunch with one of my Caucasian friends, and we're talking, and I'm like, I got this airport meeting, and literally he was like, I use it for my sunburned scalp. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to pitch. And so I went into the airport and I pitched that. And if you think about it, again, a huge need, particularly in Florida, is that tourists come, they bake in the sun, and the hidden thing that they never talk about is their sunburned scalp. And so pretty much we position the product for sunburned scalp, and it's just as effective. And that's how we were able to land the airport. But
Oh, that's awesome.
um,
Creative there too.
absolutely. And so we, because of that, you know, the product sells in the travel retail space. So that's been extremely interesting and great, because it gives us exposure to international, right? International base. And so we've been able to grow our international footprint from the UK to Canada, Denmark, France, Australia, you know, Germany. It's just been
That's
amazing.
so big.
Yeah. And so that when you get those online sales, you're like, how did they even hear about us?
Yeah.
Like in Australia? Like, wow. And I think it's a combination of being right in travel retail, and of course, you know, doing that online marketing. And so being in airports is definitely huge for us. It's a great milestone, and one we're extremely proud of. As you talk about retail stores, right? So launching into Target was major. We continue to have a great relationship, in which we've transitioned the business to Target.com. It just kind of works for us right now with the strategy that Target's going with right now. Launching into CVS Stores was a dream come true. Again, it's a great synergy for our brand as you think about healthcare and CVS.
Right. I was going to ask, was the Moffitt results a part of the reason you decided to do CVS?
Yeah, absolutely.
Drugstore channel?
Absolutely. When speaking with the buyer and talking about our relationship with Moffitt, it just kind of fit, right? It just made sense. And so with that, you know, we are performing really well in CVS and looking to expand that relationship in the future. Can't dive into what that looks like, but it's really exciting. And so I think what's great for us, we just launched in Bed Bath & Beyond and Harmon Stores.
Yes, I saw that.
In June.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We launched on Kroger.com and Walmart.com. And so we're busy, you know, we're busy right now. And I think what makes me most proud is that today we don't have any investors. This is all.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So wow.
Equity, this is all us. And so that doesn't mean one day we won't.
Right.
But right now, like
you own 100% of your company.
100%. 100%.
Love that.
I think it just adds so much value, because if one day we entertain those conversations, it's, you know, it's not what they're doing for us, but it's like, hey, here's what we've already built, and you can only help make this bigger, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been an amazing journey. And it's one I'm still kind of pinching myself every day, because, you know, with $0, and I won't say $0, because I was able to kind of pitch my money together and make it work, and, you know, and look at, you know, alternative resources for funding and things of that nature in the beginning days. It's just great to now allow the business to kind of grow and, you know, see how it's going to scale. But we do have some exciting things coming up in terms of new retailers for next year. So
everyone has to stay tuned.
Stay tuned
for those. You know, Canviiy is going on 7 years old this year. What have been some of the key learnings that you can share from the ups and downs? Also, did you launch on e-commerce first, or did you initially get a retail opportunity?
Yes. So no, we launched on e-commerce first, and I will tell you, for being a marketer, it was like crickets. It was like, where are the orders? Like, what is happening, right? People think you like launch a website and you're going to start getting orders. That's not how it works. And so we had to hustle. When I tell you, we were at the farmers markets and the trade shows and the beauty shows and the hair show, like, it's a hustle.
You have to get in front of consumers.
Yes. And get them to know who you are, get them to understand your value proposition and the benefits that you offer, and why you're better than the smelly stuff that they're currently using. And I won't say any brand names, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, no, our Target relationship didn't start, I think, until 2018.
Yeah. So you were like 3 years in just online.
Yeah.
Which
it's
good news. You can start online and be successful. You have to have that long range vision that Sherrel had. You didn't give up. You continued to go for it, and you continue to invest in how do I bring more consumers, get creative?
Yes. And some of those key learnings, that's a really great question, is um it was insightful to move slow in the beginning,
Okay.
because we were able to define who our customer is, right? Because
Mhm.
I thought our customer was going to be this cool hip college girl that loved to, like, get her hair done and then use the Scalpless, and I was so wrong. I was completely wrong. Our customer was 25 plus, the working woman that cared about what ingredients that she used. She could afford a premium affordable product, right?
Yeah.
This was one that actually read the ingredient label.
Mhm.
I was just so wrong. And so if I had jumped into, let's say, a retail at the very beginning and say, here's our core audience, and then market it to college students, I would have been wrong. And so it allowed us to learn who our customer is. It allowed us to learn their demographics, their psychographics. And then more importantly, it allowed us to navigate who we're going to be as a brand, right?
Mhm.
And because, again, I thought we were going to be the styling product, and we ended up really in the space where we're serving customers that are dealing with issues, right? That
More
are
in the
dealing with
wellness space, which I noticed you call your brand a wellness brand.
Absolutely. So we're in the health and wellness space because that's really where we live. And the reason why we position the brand that way is because we're not just, you know, in retail stores, right? We're in travel retail, we're in healthcare. So if we just say we're a hair care product, then that sort of limits, right,
Yeah.
the growth of the company. And so for us, it was important to look at health and wellness, because that allows you, if you're just a hair care product, can you go into vitamins? Can you go
Mhm.
into nutraceuticals? Can you go, like, there's so many other directions we could take the brand if you really know how to position it.
Yeah.
And so the key learnings was we got a chance to know our brand, build our brand,
Mhm.
understand our metrics, understand where they lived, what were the top DMAs in terms of
Mhm.
geographic areas. And so even though we're based in Florida, our top geographic areas was New York, was Chicago,
Okay.
was LA.
Okay.
But we would not have learned that if we didn't take our time to build a brand. And so it was
Yeah.
priceless.
That's a really great point. And, we usually talk about advice at the end, but while we're at it and talking about growing slowly, for a brand that might be in year 2, what were some of the things going in your mind, and what advice would you give them? I think growing slow is a great one. What other advice would you give someone sort of not yet at the peak, still maybe in that product market fit exploratory part of their journey? What would you tell them so that they can keep going like you did, persisting 7 years later?
Absolutely. So what I would recommend is that you listen to your customers, and remember that your brand isn't what you say it is. It's what they say it is.
Love
Right?
that.
And
Hmm.
so if they say they love the brand because of X, Y, and Z, that's what your brand is, right?
Hmm.
Um, However, in this day and age, people think because you put up an image and you got, people dancing around, like that's how your brand is perceived. But it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And so that's why, as you mentioned, we started thinking about health and wellness. Like, if our customers are saying, wow, this helped me with my psoriasis, then we can't be out here saying,
It's
you
beauty
know,
brand.
right, we're a beauty
Right.
brand, like, it doesn't make
No.
sense, right? And so by listening, we understood that our customers see us in a certain light, and it just makes sense to make sure we portray that, because that is important to us and to our customers. And so, definitely keep that in mind. Don't ignore what they're saying. Like, we had a bad batch years ago, and customers started letting us know, like, hey, something's not right here. And so I went back to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer's like, hey, no, it's the same. And I'm like, no, they're telling me it's not right.
Yeah.
Let's get it off the market, and let's make sure we have the right changes. And so it's just important that you listen. And then I would say, listen to your first gut, listen to your first mind at times, but still be data driven.
Hmm.
And I say that in terms of when making decisions about where you go next. Do you make another product? Do you expand into marketing? The truth is, you want to look at your data. So if you want to do a test, launch a test, whether it's Facebook ads or etc.
Hmm.
If you get some type of traction, then or not, that's telling you either the ad wasn't great, or customers may not be interested in that product, and you might have to pivot, right? And so that was a learning that we had. Like, I just knew for our smaller items that we initially launched, like, people are gonna love this. Like, you could throw it in your purse, it's just easy.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. People wanted big bottles. And so, and that had to do with our data. Our data was showing on a monthly basis, just based on customers coming to our site, right? They were coming, we were driving, but we couldn't drive sales conversions. And that's because we didn't offer the SKU or the item size that they preferred.
Yeah.
And then once we did, then we learned, hey, that's what they wanted. And so we discontinued those SKUs and ultimately offered the item that they really wanted. And so I could have stuck to my guns and say, no, I knew this was going to be the item of choice. But if you listen to data, the data will tell you.
Yeah. So you're mentioning testing and learning. I think in addition to that, I'm hearing that you also use that information and iterated, which is also pretty important. You didn't spin your wheels for too long. Maybe you might've been in the background, but ultimately you did make the tough decisions to shift as you needed to in order to say, okay, this isn't working for us. Let's make the shifts needed. Let's iterate and see where that goes. You're still exploring. You don't always know immediately what consumers want, but you're not going to know unless you test, give it enough time to understand what the market says and keep it moving. That really has worked for you over the years.
Absolutely. And what was important was to know is that I knew the formula was great, like hands down. I just knew that the packaging that we were offering it in wasn't the preferred packaging. And so that's a difference.
This is an iteration of your packaging as well, the design and everything like that.
Well, originally we always had the 3 SKUs. Like, so on day 1, we launched the bottle. I knew what it looked like. I had the label done, but we just couldn't afford it at the time.
Right.
And so customers were literally leaving comments like, when is the bottle coming? I want the bottle. I've already tried the little stuff. When is it coming? And so that's when I started to know, like, okay, we need to get this bottle sooner. And that still took, a year and a half, 2 years. But ultimately we got there.
Nice. That's also really good. I want to cover some other advice. So you're in year 7, which is very great. Like, companies don't last this long. And so you're getting a lot of proof like, okay, this can keep going. I made it to year 7. What was the turning point for you? We know you had your crossroads early on about, okay, I'm going to either, work for a big brand or make my own. You had that crossroads. What was another crossroad for you in your business where you knew you needed to do this or that to make, to get that next growth?
Yeah. So it was when we started, was it after Target? It was after Target when we started to get interest from other retailers.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, we've been piecemealing this kind of, I got to figure out a plan of how do we really grow this and grow this in a sustainable way. And so, for me, it was speaking to mentors and speaking to people who had done it before. So for example, I was blessed enough to have relationships with, the CEO of Vogue International. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they have several lines out. And so he sold his company to Johnson & Johnson for, hundreds of dollars. Yeah. And so got on the phone with him and got some advice. Got on the phone with his COO of the company and got some advice. And so my question to them was, how do you grow the brand financially without giving it all away?
Yeah.
And they walked me down that list.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend, those that are, getting ready to grow, the best thing you can do is ask others that have done it. And don't be afraid to ask. Like, I knew I was getting to a point where I couldn't figure it out. I'm just like, how do I figure this out? And so I just sought help. I was just like, I need to speak to somebody who's done it, who's built it, who's grown it, who's sold it, and ultimately doing different things now.
Yeah. And it didn't make you not a great marketer. It just meant this problem was so close to you. It was your problem that sometimes it's hard to see the solution. And if it was someone else's problem, you'd be able to tell them what to do, but it's hard to self-diagnose something like that. So getting those mentors, that's not a bad thing. That's wisdom, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so it really, took me off a trajectory on where I thought we should go to another one. And so I definitely recommend when you're going to that next step, if possible, I think oftentimes we're scared or we're afraid to reach out to people, but sometimes people will take a 5-10 minute call and say, sure, I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
So just be fearless, and be relentless in trying to get those answers.
Yeah. So talk about your HSN Good Housekeeping Entrepreneur competition that you won.
Yeah, so we were actually a semi-finalist. Again, I'm based in Tampa. Their headquarters is based here. And they had kind of like open call for entrepreneurs that were interested in talking about their brand. And so I submitted an application, and they invited me out to the studio to pitch our brand. And so I did. And it was a nice experience because there were other entrepreneurs there. So you had to feel that pressure of, man, I got to really bring it today.
Right.
And then it also, they were asking great questions, which showed that I wasn't quite ready. Right.
Okay. Okay.
Like, just questions where I was like, oh yeah, I'm probably not ready for this.
Yeah.
Because what they don't tell you, and I won't get into the whole bit of it, but for HSN in particular, when you see them pitching on TV screen, typically all of the items have to be packaged in a certain way.
Okay.
Within a warehouse. It's like it's already prepackaged in the HSN way. And so if you sell 0 of them, you've wasted all of that money
on
packaging and on this and on that. And so it was just like, I don't know if I want to do that right after they started kind of running down what the requirements were. But ultimately, great experience.
It worked out.
It worked out.
Yeah. And I think sometimes things like that, where you're just like, I'm just going to go, you get in front of other folks that you get those questions that you might have not considered, and you get to say, what's for me, what's not for me, how do I prepare down the line for when I am ready for other opportunities. That's also great too, that type of exposure, because you're getting questions from folks who know the business in some other ways.
Yes. So, I mean, we could probably do HSN today, but
hey, you're ready now.
But, 5-6 years ago, we just weren't ready. So
yeah,
again, great experience.
Totally understand. So you've been having so much great success. What is the vision moving forward? What is the next frontier for Canviiy and for Sherrel?
Yeah, so we're, as a team, we're looking at Canviiy 2.0, and that is really making sure that we have systems and processes to really scale the company. Yeah. And because you can have all the opportunity in the world, but if you can't handle the growth, then ultimately you may set yourself up for failure. And so again, we're looking at, we kind of have a 4-tier growth strategy on how we're going to grow the brand. And it's making sure we go deep in the channels that we're in, right? Instead of going, some people go super wide. For us, and as the leader of the company, it's important for us to go deep. So if we're in retail, if we're in drug retail, do we go deeper into drug retail? Right. Because we've been very successful in that.
Really own the segment, own the channel.
You got it.
Get that name recognition, create the behavior. I come here for my product.
Got it. And so if for us, that's what's next. It's going deeper in the channels that we're successful in. And then ultimately growing a business model, again, that the systems and the processes are so great, are so strong, are so efficient that the business could kind of just multiply itself. And so that's what we're focused on right now, not necessarily trying to run after every opportunity, but making sure that we have the systems and the processes in place, because, you'll learn that you can't do it all. And then you'll learn that, as opportunities come, if you can't handle them, you just wasted a lot of time and energy, and more importantly, respect from the individuals that you're talking to, because you promised them you could do something and you might not be able to deliver on. Right. And so for me, that's important. My integrity, my character. And so, I'm very honest and upright and upfront with our partners, like if we could deliver something and if we can't, or vice versa. If I know we can, I'll confidently say that. And so that's why for us as a company, as we're starting to grow, in an exponential way, we have to make sure we have those systems in place. And so that's what we're focused on right now. And then the vision, once that's in place, all in place, because we're probably about 70% there, then it's like, let's go even harder.
Let's go even harder. I love that. So we talked about you as a professional woman, as a woman in business, the CEO, the founder, the entrepreneur. What does kind of getting to those heights mean for your personal life as a friend, a wife, a sister, sibling, daughter? Tell us about that part, the human part of you.
Man, that's a good question. I think I'm going through that as we speak.
Okay.
Of how does one find balance? How does one find time for self-care? How do I not burn out? How do I assess what's important and prioritize?
Yeah.
I think I'm going through that right now, and I'm still trying to figure out how do I maneuver that. I'm married. I have 2 girls. I have a 10 and 11-year-old. And for me, I think it's being present in the moment, which is very important, right? So when I'm with my family and we're eating dinner, I'm not on my phone. I'm not running to my computer. When someone needs to speak with me, I put down my devices and I look them in the eye and make sure that I'm present. Right. And so that's one of the ways I try in all the chaos and the greatness and the busyness to give myself grace in that manner of, yes, you may not have all the time in the world, but the time that you do have with them, be present.
Yeah.
And I think I learned that from other entrepreneurs and hearing other stories that, your husband can tell, your kids can tell if you're paying attention or not. Right. And so I don't want to be that mom that, we always think we're doing such a great job. And then 10, 15 years ago, it was like, you never listened to us. You were never attentive. Like, I don't want to be that mom, that think I'm just killing it and I'm not.
Right. Do your girls recognize the significance of what you are doing? How aware are they of mommy?
Yeah. So it's funny, like, I had a couple interviews on TV, like on the local news, and they was like, Mommy, you're famous. I'm like, no, I'm not. Because that's not my goal. My goal is to be successful. And to be successful in a way where I can go back to the Bahamas and we could build companies and institutions and offer the people opportunity that they weren't able to have because they weren't able to come to the United States. And you know what I mean by that.
I know.
And so that's my end goal. That's my vision. So however Canviiy grows, it grows. But if that could afford a way to help bring back resources and bring back, institutions and ideas and competencies and human capital to the Bahamas and help them in a greater way, because I am that girl, right? I am that girl that, grew up with, 9 and 10 cousins in a household. I was the one walking to the wash house to wash my clothes at the wash house. I was the one, where you went to church, and when you came home, you had breakfast, you might have had a little bit of lunch, and you had dinner, right? And so I didn't grow up, in a way that I don't value things and don't appreciate things and don't understand the importance of blessings, right? Yeah. I think, some entrepreneurs and, get out there and it's like, oh, I'm self-made. You will never in your life ever hear me say that, because I know that I'm God-made. Yeah. And without his strength, without his help, without his guidance and his anointing, that I will be not where I am today. And so that's how I view success. And I always tell my girls, like, it's not about being rich. It's about being successful in whatever that is for you. And I hope I'm never famous, because I want to be able, I don't know about you, but I want to be able to walk to the grocery store with my hair looking crazy, t-shirt and some jeans, and no one knows who I am. Right. Like that is my goal, and still have millions of dollars in the bank. Like that's I
don't know if we're helping you right now, but I want that for you too.
So ultimately, if I could do that and no one, I don't want to be a Beyonce where you can't even go to a restaurant, right. You can't eat. Like, that is not my goal. Yeah. My goal is to build some wealth, that we could go back and we could help others build a life that they didn't envision they could have for themselves. And so that's what I try to instill in my girls. Like, I'm doing this for a bigger vision. And I think they get it. And
Yeah. What about your family? Do they
uh,
understand?
yeah, they're really supportive. So I have, I have 5 brothers and sisters. So I have an older sister and the rest are boys. They're really supportive. One of my youngest brothers, he works in the business. So he's a
Okay.
shareholder,
Nice.
doing all things IT. And so he understands the importance of what we're building and why we're building it. And then everyone else is just uber supportive. They've packed packages before. They've gone to shows.
Yeah.
They've been my testers for new products. And so everybody is they're really engaged in what we're doing and just rooting for our success. I would think I'm probably in the friend category, not a good friend right now. Just because you have to peel out what's important. Honestly, this year, I'm trying to do a better job in engaging with my women relationships. Like I
Yeah.
am like girlfriends. I am a great friend, but I got to prioritize.
Yeah. You just
You
have
know,
limited time.
yeah. And
Yeah.
for me, it's having a wholesome relationship, right? It's like, that takes time. That takes nurturing. Even if you're like going to dinner with a girlfriend every couple weeks, like that still takes planning and going. And so when you just have limited time, sometimes a call or a text is just what we got to do for right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So until
Totally
I, of course,
understand.
I could get some of the load off of my plate. But when you're growing, you got to be on the business, stay in the business, understand the data, and make sure that you're building it in a great way. And then, for Canviiy, we have a team. So it's a team of 5 right now, and making sure that I'm nurturing them and helping them and getting them to understand my leadership style and how I work and what the expectations are for the business. And so, it's a lot of moving parts,
A
but
lot of
I'm
moving parts.
grateful, and I'm thankful, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. The last thing I want to cover is how has the pandemic impacted your business? That's kind of sunsetting behind us in some ways, but it was a big piece of how you might have had to shift. What was that experience like for Canviiy and even for you as a leader running a business during this time?
Yes. So the pandemic was, it was a reset on a personal perspective of, man, what's really important. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second part of it was, oh, wow, everybody's buying plastic. Everybody and their mom had a hand
Right.
sanitizer. And so that really changed some relationships that we had, where we had to find some suppliers. And I remember contacting like our bottle supplier, our pump supplier,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, it's every man for themselves. Like, he's like, I have so much business right now, I have to shut off my website.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
and so he was like, honestly, I can't service you anymore. And I'm like, what? Literally. He's like, not because he didn't want to, it was just, he was so busy.
Inventory and stuff. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
So I literally, in the middle of the pandemic, had to find a new bottle
Bottle
manufacturer.
supplier. Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Yeah, supplier. And literally they were trying to get me to purchase like 1,000,000 bottles. I'm like, I don't need 1,000,000 bottles. And again, was able to negotiate and have conversations like, hey, I'm not interested in being a one-time customer. I'm interested in being a long-term customer. So if you could work with me, at least on this initial order, I can guarantee you we'll do more business in the future. And that's kind of how that ended. But yeah,
Wow.
we had to really, our supply chain was hit. And we had to navigate, and we had to learn, and we had to pivot, right, and make things happen. And that's
Yeah.
the important of being a good customer too, and having good relationships with your vendors,
Mm-hmm.
because they were able to say, okay, let's look at who you've worked with, what's your past history, what's your credit limits, things of that nature, and they could trust, right, that you'll be a good customer.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a benefit to us. I will say, during the pandemic, it was bittersweet, because while we were dealing with kind of supply chain issues, not extremely challenging, but challenging, we still were dealing with George Floyd, right? And impacts of how that drove our business in a positive way.
Absolutely.
So it was bittersweet because we had to, of course, see those images in the video of him dying, right? In a brutal way.
Brutally.
But it brought awareness, right, to Black-owned
Certainly.
brands. It brought awareness of, I would say it was an awakening for customers of, man, is this Black-owned, and having some pride and some ownership in that. And so that was a really a great wave that we were able to ride during 2020 of just the awakening of customers and that emerging support. And then, not just from customers, but from retailers as well, right? Recognizing the importance of Black-owned brands and how we're driving innovation in the marketplace.
So you did see new opportunities from retailers, or at least have increased conversations, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while we were dealing with some challenges, there was definitely, some blessings during 2020, and one that, we're grateful for.
I love that for you. So, we always end on, what does it mean to be Black on shelf?
Woo. So I think, particularly for Canviiy, what it means to be Black on shelf is that innovation can truly be appreciated when you're Black or brown, regardless of your budget. And I say that to say, if you are Black on shelf, or you get the opportunity to be Black on shelf, be diligent about making sure that you're driving excellence in every step of the way.
Yeah.
Whether that's customer service, whether that's your packaging, whether that's your formulation, whether that's in your presentations. That's something for Canviiy that we try to make sure that we excel at, is that we're giving 120%, and then you become known for that for customers. Like, okay, their customer service is on point, right? Their formulations are on point.
Yes.
What they're bringing to market is on point. And then ultimately your quality doesn't become a question. They expect that this is going to be great because this is how you guys have always delivered. And so for us, being Black on shelf is just making sure we're delivering excellence in every sort of the way. And and for Canviiy, it's definitely been a great journey.
Love that. So where can the Black on Shelf family follow you and continue to keep up to date with some of this growth that's coming?
Awesome. Yes. So for Canviiy, you can find us on Instagram, and that's spelled Canviiy. Also, we're on Facebook, same thing, Canviiy, Canviiy. You can find us on Canviiy.com. We're also on Amazon. We're on Amazon.com, Walmart.com. Make sure you shop at CVS for our products. Also Bed Bath & Beyond. And make sure that you check us out on YouTube as well. And so again, I thank you so much. I thank everyone for the wonderful support, and I look forward to each of you, trying our phenomenal scalp health solutions that we have.
Yeah. And thank you again, Sherrel, for coming. I hope everyone sees why, Canviiy is such an excellent product, because it's powered by such a phenomenal entrepreneur herself, who we got a chance to speak to. Follow Sherrel as well. There's a lot you can learn, as you found out today. And she's also just showing us what it looks like to be a Black woman entrepreneur. Many others can identify with having, a background maybe from the Caribbean, or maybe you might be an immigrant even. And if you just need that inspiration on whether you can do it or not, Sherrel is a great example that you can. And if you're just a woman in business who just needs to see that person that you can look up to, Sherrel clearly is a great example of that. We've got some amazing nuggets from Sherrel today, and we're so grateful that you did come on.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I just commend you for the platform that you're building. Keep up the phenomenal work. And I look forward to watching you. You're going to do great things.
Thank you.